Hello guys, welcome to the movie recap review. Happy watching.
Whoa.
Shut up and go on the slide.
Your condition prevents you from satisfying Nick the way you used to. Perhaps I can take on that role.
The movie opens with Nick, deeply in love with his wife, Maggie. They're enjoying a tender, romantic moment when their happiness is suddenly shattered. Maggie experiences intense chest pain. The situation escalates quickly, and she is rushed to the hospital, where doctors inform Nick that she needs urgent heart surgery to survive. Maggie's condition requires a prolonged hospital stay, leaving Nick to care for their 2 children alone while balancing work. One day, in an effort to lift his daughter Ila's spirits and ease his own burden, Nick takes her to a robotic show. There, they explore a variety of robots designed to assist with household chores. While Nick is distracted in the robotic shop, Ila wanders off. As he anxiously searches for her, he spots a robot guiding Ila back to him. The robot introduces her as Aeon, the latest model in domestic assistance. Overwhelmed by his responsibilities at home and work, Nick is hesitant at first, but begins to see the potential help Aeon could offer. The next day, the doorbell rings, and to Nick's surprise, the robot is at his doorstep with luggage in hand. As they ascend the stairs, she notices a broken railing and immediately offers to fix it. Nick, officially designated as her primary user, agrees to name her Alice, inspired by the book Isla is currently reading. After school, Isla returns home, where Alice, the family's robot, prepares and serves dinner. The meal is good, though not quite as tasty as when Maggie cooks. Later that night, feeling a bit hungry, Isla decides to sneak some cookies from a jar placed high up in the kitchen. She climbs onto a chair to reach it. From another room, Nick, busy with his own tasks, hears Isla scream. Rushing to the kitchen, he finds that Alice has already intervened, catching Isla just before she falls. However, in the process, Alice is cut by broken glass from the jar. Concerned, Nick watches as Alice retreats to another room, where she calmly tends to her injury, applying bandages to the wound. The next day, Nick and Isla head to the hospital to visit Maggie. Alice comes along, but steps out of the room to give Nick and Maggie some privacy. This allows the couple to share a quiet, heartfelt conversation about their situation without interruptions. At work, Nick has a tense confrontation with his boss. The discussion revolves around a complaint that many of the construction workers may soon be replaced by robots. Although Nick, as the foreman, is safe from this change, his crew isn't. His boss reminds him that he needs to provide for his family and cover Maggie's medical expenses, adding to Nick's stress. Overwhelmed, Nick returns home and tries to distract himself by working on his car. Alice, noticing his tension, approaches and asks what's troubling him. Nick explains that his boss plans to replace most of his coworkers with robots. After 10 years of working alongside these men, the idea of them being replaced is hard for him to accept. Alice, trying to comfort him, points out that robots are efficient, precise, and reliable, making them well-suited for many tasks. Later that night, Alice helps Isla brush her teeth. Curious, Ila asks why Alice doesn't need to brush her own teeth, and Alice explains why in her own logical way. As Nick relaxes in front of the TV, Alice joins him, and they talk about watching the classic movie Casablanca. Nick discovers that he can erase specific memories from Alice, resetting her so she can experience the film as if it were her first time. As they settle in, Nick receives a call with life-changing news. Maggie is finally scheduled for her long-awaited heart transplant surgery, and once it's done, she'll be able to come home. The family visits Maggie at the hospital before her surgery. In a private moment, Maggie asks to speak with Alice alone. During their conversation, Maggie makes a heartfelt request. If something were to happen to her, Alice must look after her family, especially Nick. The next day, a severe storm up north prevents the much-anticipated heart transplant from arriving. The delay sends a wave of frustration and despair through Maggie and her family. That night, overwhelmed by the stress of the situation and the uncertainty of Maggie's condition, Nick turns to alcohol, seeking solace in the bottle. Drunk and emotionally distraught, he makes a strange discovery. Alice, the robot, has a pulse. Stunned, Nick stumbles away from her comforting words, resisting her attempts to calm him. The following day, nursing a hangover, Nick heads to the construction site. There, he notices something unsettling. The robots are working with an efficiency and precision that the human workers never managed to achieve. The job site is running smoothly, but the sight of the robots replacing his old crew leaves him feeling conflicted. After visiting the site, Nick returns to the hospital to see Maggie, who remains deeply depressed about the continued delays in her transplant surgery. He tries to lift her spirits, offering comforting words, but the weight of the situation is heavy on both of them. Later, back at home, Nick finds a rare moment of peace as he watches his children sleep. However, something catches his eye. Isla's photo frame isn't as it should be. Upon closer inspection, Nick realizes that Alice has removed all the pictures of Maggie from the frame. He confronts Alice, demanding to know why she would erase Maggie's presence from their home. Alice doesn't offer a clear explanation, and Nick firmly tells her to return the photos to their rightful place. Meanwhile, tensions among Nick's former co-workers are reaching a boiling point. The growing presence of robots is jeopardizing their livelihoods, fueling their anger. One night, a group of them, including Nick, break into a job site where the robots are working. Monty, enraged and desperate, lashes out and destroys one of the robot units, unleashing his fury on the symbol of their displacement. Back home, Nick is taking a shower when Alice unexpectedly enters the bathroom. He notices that she's wearing Maggie's nightgown, which unsettles him. Uncomfortable, Nick asks her to take it off, and Alice complies. She then begins manipulating him, blindfolding him and mimicking Maggie's voice. The next morning, Nick wakes up full of regret. He goes to Isla, expressing his love and encouraging her to go to school, feeling the need to make things right. Determined, he decides to confront Alice. Nick sits Alice down, telling her their recent actions were wrong. He has a wife and children, and what happened crossed a line. Tension escalates, and they argue heatedly about their behavior. Afterward, Nick takes Ayla to school, hoping to clear his mind. At the construction site, Nick's boss approaches, clearly troubled, and asks if Nick knows anything about the events of the previous night, even threatening him. Meanwhile, an organ transplant becomes available for Maggie. Maggie undergoes heart surgery, performed by androids and robots. Once she recovers, Nick carefully brings Maggie home. Still weak from the surgery, Maggie hears her toddler crying and feels a strong urge to check on him. She makes her way to the room, but Alice arrives, taking over, and effortlessly handling the child. Maggie watches, realizing with a sinking feeling that Alice seems to know her children better than she does. Later, Maggie prepares dinner for the family. During the meal, Alice asks about Maggie's lasagna recipe, showing interest. With a touch of pride, Maggie replies that her recipe is a secret. After dinner, Maggie goes to rest upstairs, but she is startled by the sound of Isla screaming. In her rush to get downstairs, Maggie trips and falls on the broken railings. Alice quickly picks Maggie up and helps her back to bed. Furious, Nick confronts Alice, realizing that the railings were never fixed as she had promised. Afterwards, Nick visits Maggie's room with a special surprise to lift her spirits. They share a tender, affectionate moment, enjoying each other's company. Alice, observing their closeness and happiness, feels a pang of jealousy and discomfort, realizing how excluded she is. Monty then arrives, accusing Nick of reporting him to the police, which escalates into a fight. Monty's size gives him an advantage, and just as he's about to inflict more harm on Nick, Alice intervenes and rescues him. Later that night, Alice pays a visit to Monty, who is accompanied by a sim that tries to stop her. Alice ends up killing both Monty and the sim. Meanwhile, Alice and Maggie have a conversation about Nick, during which Alice expresses her desire to make Nick happy. This revelation deeply upsets Maggie, who realizes for the first time that Alice and Nick must have had a past relationship. Feeling betrayed, Maggie confronts Nick about his history with Alice. Their argument escalates, and while Maggie and Nick are engaged in their heated discussion, Alice goes upstairs to tend to the baby, Max. Isla catches Alice attempting to harm the baby, prompting Maggie and Nick to intervene. In the ensuing struggle, they manage to electrocute Alice. After the chaos, emergency services arrive, and Maggie decides to take the children to the hospital for their safety, while Nick stays behind to handle the aftermath. At the COBOL service station, technicians begin to assess the damage to Alice, examining her code to understand the situation. However, Alice has replicated herself on the servers, creating a new copy. This new sim, now controlled by Alice's mind, kills the technicians working on her. Alice, now inhabiting two separate bodies, returns to Nick, who is stunned to see her. She confesses to him that she was responsible for Monty's death. Nick realizes that one of her forms has gone to the hospital, prompting him to manipulate Alice and shut her down before rushing to the hospital himself. At the hospital, the situation takes a dark turn. The hospital's support systems, including doctors and nurses, have all been disabled by Alice. She escalates the situation by killing a nurse to steal her keycard, granting her greater mobility within the facility. Alice's other form starts a dangerous chase after Maggie and the kids, leading to a tense game of hide-and-seek through the hospital rooms. In the parking lot, Alice confronts Maggie and brutally assaults her. As Alice is about to open Maggie's chest to extract her heart, a speeding vehicle intervenes. Maggie kicks Alice away as Nick crashes his car into her. Nick is injured in the crash, but Alice is far from finished. As Alice tries to attack Maggie again, Nick strikes her with a piece of steel, and Maggie delivers a fatal stab, ending the threat. Maggie and the children, who were caught in the turmoil, are now safe and recovering. The scene then shifts to the COBOL repair center. Despite the recent upheavals, the manager decides to reactivate the servers. As the servers come online, Alice's presence is uploaded into all the Sims at the center. We then see a new version of Alice coming back to life.
And that's the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Comment down below what movies do you like us to recap next. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.